Hello and welcome to 10 plus changes to the endgame for both PvE and PvP inside of Destiny 2, including the portal system and basically everything endgame with Edge of Fate. Today we're joined by Diffizzle, who many of you guys may know from Trials as just an absolute Trials demon, but he's also one of the biggest grinders in the Destiny community as it comes to endgame leveling and getting to the pinnacle cap of power faster than just about anybody else in the community. So Fizz, thanks for joining us today, man. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to be here.
So let's get started right away. Let's just dive right into it. First of all, if you guys haven't seen, Diffizzle has an incredible leveling guide on his YouTube channel, so we'll link that down in the description below. If you guys are having trouble reaching the 400 power cap or the 450 pinnacle cap, he has all the tips and tricks you will ever need to know. This dude has invested so much time into helping people learn how to efficiently level. And yeah, so dude, great content there. I thoroughly enjoyed that video. It was super helpful for me. So let's get started talking into kind of how we see the game right now, how we're feeling about kind of Destiny's endgame with the Edge of Fate, and also kind of opportunities for improvement, because I know a lot of players have been unhappy, but I think right now the first thing I want to talk about before we get into, you know, some of the obvious improvements that can be made with kind of the endgame portal system is how are we feeling about kind of the bones of the portal system, the current endgame system, the different tiers of rewards. How are you feeling about kind of the structure that they've built kind of as a foundation moving forward?
I feel like it's really good, in my opinion. I think that it kind of strikes a balance of, and it answers a question that we've had, or yeah, I feel that like we've had for a minute, which is like, you know, there being nothing to do in Destiny after a couple of weeks. And I think it does a really good job of like adding depth to the game that has been like sorely missing for a long time. However, it's a two-edged sword, you know, in that regard right now, where a lot of people feel very overwhelmed by how much there is to do, and also kind of unhappy about what you are typically doing if you're trying to do it the most effective way possible, which is typically running the same 2 or 3 missions over and over again. However, I do think it's worth mentioning that no matter what Bungie were to change, if you are wanting to power level the most effective way possible, it's almost probably always going to be that way to some degree. However, I think, you know, they can definitely do more to make it so other things feel more rewarding. I think solo ops strikes a good balance of a good time, effort, and reward investment, whereas fireteam ops, pinnacle ops, and crucible ops fall behind in that regard.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. I think, like, to your point, and it's such a good point, is there's always going to be a most efficient method of leveling that gets found in the community. And I think people kind of have this idea in their head that, you know, oh, we shouldn't just be farming Caldera or K1 Logistics. Listen, that's going to exist no matter what. There's always going to be an activity or some sort of leveling method that's going to get found, and players are going to min-max that. I think right now, like, to your point, it's that even if I don't want to min-max to the nth degree and go farm Caldera or like K1 Logistics over and over again, and, you know, have 3-minute runs for pinnacles and powerfuls and things like that, just having the option to do more in the end game for me is what's lacking. Like, to your point, I shouldn't feel restricted. Like, right now it feels like Destiny thrives when it's a social game, and it feels like the most optimal way is always just within solo ops running the same mission over and over again. And that's kind of become not like the whole expansion, but that is like the majority of your playtime is spent in like 1 or 2 missions. And I would really like to see them reevaluate and rebalance the number of powerfuls you get from both Fireteam and Pinnacle Ops, as well as expand like what's available in those sections. So like right now in the Pinnacle portal, we have Whisper, Kel's Fall, Encore, Starcrossed, and obviously Encore was crazy for the first like week or so of the DLC before they disabled it and kind of retuned their rewards. Honestly, like, I don't know, I'm not sure how they go about fixing that. I think for me, in terms of the Pinnacle portal, I wish I could have more options of things to do and not feel like I always have to be min-maxing. So like, for example, I feel like there should be an exotic mission rotator where I can go and I can run any exotic mission, which I kind of have here, right? But that's all that's in Pinnacle at the moment. But there should be a dungeon rotator, maybe like a weekly dungeon. There's 3 dungeons that are featured where you get bonus drops. So you get 2 drops per encounter. Or I want to go and run raids with my friends. Like all the legacy raid and dungeon content that they've invested so many resources into have kind of fallen into the background, which is honestly, it's a huge bummer because like it's basically as bleak as the director is right now. Like you just never play that content, you never hear about that content. It's not relevant. I don't even know if some of the raids have the updated gear tiering or like models in them either. Like I think they still might be granting like the older like stats and things like that. Which to me just seems like a pretty big oversight. So I would love to see more options like a raid, exotic mission, dungeon rotator. And then honestly, one of the things that was like a huge bummer for me, selfishly as the GMG creator, but like they removed GMs as well. Like you can still do them technically like in the Fireteam portal, but like it's custom, you know, settings and modifiers and things, and there's no consistency to it. I think there was something to be said about like you could always go and run a GM, know what to expect, you could run it with your friends, get your Conquer Seal and farm gear, and like you just can't really do that anymore, which is unfortunate. So I hope they revisit that. I think a raid, dungeon, GM, and exotic mission rotator in the Pinnacle tab would go such a long way. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they want those things too. I think there's a couple. To me, that this expansion is really kind of like a reset, a hard reset, and I think it kind of set it as like a Destiny 3 in Destiny 2. And I feel like a lot of the resources that they put into the Edge of Fate, at least that we can see right now, which, I mean, we have Ash and Iron coming, and I think that we'll probably see a lot more in that. But I think a lot of the resources went into systems like Armor 3.0, Weapons 3.0, the tiering system, modifiers, the portal, you know, stuff like that. And I think as a result of them kind of focusing on innovation rather than like volume of content, it has made things feel like there's not many things to do, you know, and a lot of the content we're playing is older content. And I think that's a valid feedback to be unhappy about that. And I think systems like having the raid and dungeons in the portal and like having exotics be able to go up to tier 5 and stuff like that just wasn't able to make it into the final build, or maybe it wasn't in the scope of the Edge of Fate, and it will be coming in Renegades, and that kind of just is what it is.
Yeah.
But this is really them setting a foundation for the game. And don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. It has a lot of problems right now, and I think that it's good to understand that those problems are not set in stone and that they can be adjusted and that they will be adjusted. And that you should, if you're someone that's unhappy with it, you know, communicate that as respectfully as you can, because honestly, if you are just being rude, it's not really helping anyone. Like, they are maybe going to just be less inclined to listen to your feedback. That is probably really important, very valid, and needs to be heard. But your delivery is, you know, sabotaging your end goal in that regard. So
that's a great point. Like, honestly, let's talk about some of the positives. So, like, one of the things I see on the Fireteam portal page, for example, is gear focusing, number one. So like obviously we have like the tiers of loot, and you have you know, the tiers of armor and things like that. We now have set bonuses, which is a huge W in my opinion. So there's reasons to go and farm different activities. Like, I'm not a Trials player, but for PvE I'm probably going to go play some Trials so I can get my hands on the set bonus that comes from the Trials armor, because it's really, really strong. And vice versa, right? Like there's things that are probably helpful mutually both ways for PvE and PvP. Like the Mint Retrograde Day, right? Like that was super cool in Starcross. I think it was like triple drops for Mint Retro, or you know, it was bonus drops for Mint Retrograde, and that was the focus. But like even when you're leveling, like if, for example, like this Empire Hunt Technocrat is gauntlets. So if you see that your gauntlets are falling behind on the power scale, you can go and you can target farm that specific activity. That's such a cool thing, and something we've been asking for such a long time in this game, instead of the random leveling. Like obviously there's some other things we'll talk about later when we get to like the pinnacle leveling beyond 400. But I think that's a huge win, number one. And also just, you know, like they said, like infinite powerfuls. How long did we ask for that instead of the time gated like weekly cap of being able to farm? Like you could farm to your heart's content, and that's literally what Diffizzle did. So like for the video, I'm gonna show you guys a picture that he uploaded today. This is his character screen, 450, all three characters, which is pretty insane. This is we're recording this on August 6th, so you guys can get an idea of like how hard Fizz has been grinding. What, 15-hour streams pretty much for a month or something like that, you said on Twitter?
Yeah, for the month of July, 15 hours every day.
Insane, dude.
And for the 400 to 450, it was like 115 hours in a week. So
oh my god. So let's talk about that aspect as well. So like obviously right now everybody knows like the solo ops is the way to go for grinding power up to 400. And it's more of, I guess, like a predictable pace that you can set. So talk about like what the threshold looks like beyond 400 and kind of like what that process was to get to 450, and maybe like feedback you would have on the pinnacle grind getting to max power.
I think that it is probably the worst leveling experience I have ever experienced in Destiny ever. Like
really,
it's the best way that I can describe it is it's like gambling. I mean, of course it's like gambling. It's RNG, but I feel like there can be hours, like the most that I've heard of someone going without a pinnacle, like prime engram drop, which is random, by the way. That's how you do it. Once you're at 400, there are prime engrams that drop at +3 your power, and you have no control over how you get those. And we don't know for sure, and that's the biggest problem, is there's a lot of things we don't know, but it's estimated that the drop rate is around 5% right now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so you can spend, the longest I've heard someone spend before they get a drop is 6 hours of, farming 15 clears an hour on average. So you can put a lot of time in and get nothing out of it. And I think that's the biggest problem.
Is that for one piece or one power level?
Yes, that's for one piece.
Oh my God, that's absurd. And what's the drop on a pinnacle? Is it like a +3 as well?
It's +3, yeah. It's okay. A +3. So you get one piece and it's +3, and it can be a dupe. And it will be. I think for me,
oh my God,
I had like 17 in my entire session, the 150 hours. I had like 17 dupes.
Oh my Lord.
Yeah, and it gets really bad, like where it gets the thing is when you get those tier 5s, it feels amazing. But then when you go hours, it's like you just are questioning everything about your existence. And it gets really bad. The 447 to 450, that is where it's like brutal, because you were like just at the end of the tunnel, and you're getting your pinnacles, and then you're like you need 3 more until you're 8 out of 8, to 450, and then you just start getting dupes. And then it's like it takes you hours, like 2 or 3 hours, to like even get one drop, and then it's just a dupe, and that just keeps happening. And I actually recommend for people that are wanting to do that, please save your GM conquest, like your Grandmaster conquest, for when you hit 457, because it's 8 guaranteed +3 tier 5s, and that's going to be way more useful to you in that like stretch of the power grind than like burning it early. So.
And there are no other guaranteed sources outside of the conquests for the pinnacle drops?
There is Zavala engrams, so through the seasonal hub, you can focus 2 pieces of armor that will be +3 your power level, and then also 1 random weapon that can be kinetic, energy, or heavy. Okay. But outside of that, it's just grinding solo ops, getting as many clears. And that's one thing too, is when I was doing it, it was believed that you needed A tier reward. That would give you the best drop rate. But it's believed now that you just need to do clears, so you don't even need A tier. But at the same time, we don't know if it increases drop rate or doesn't. We just, know that they can drop at like A tier, B+, B, C+, C. So it can drop pretty much at any reward tier. It's just, I mean, I feel like if you have the option to do A tier and you can do it at a relatively low power disadvantage and quickly, then you might as well, because it's going to be in constant tier 4 armor,
Right.
and that's going to be very helpful to like building a really good god build, which you can do with tier 4 armor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess one of the main pieces of feedback I can already see like happening in the comments as we're talking about this is like, okay, well, that's your fault for wanting to rush to max power right away. Like, what is the point of getting to max power? Why, like, no one needs to do this that fast. To that, so like we do have Ash and Iron coming up in a month, where the power cap is going to go up to 550 from 450. We also have the Solstice event going on right now, which is an amazing source of gear and tier 5 drops if you're at that power level. So I know like a lot of my creator friends who have had time to grind like hundreds of hours in the mines, making sure that they're high power, like they're getting amazing loot. I'm just curious, like, what would you say to that? Like, is there a benefit to getting high power quickly? Do you fear like anything with the upcoming expansion or update with Ash and Iron? Like, do you fear like if people are behind on power that'll be regrettable, or do you see it a different way?
I think that there is a benefit to it. For me, it's like I've put in a moment of discomfort, and to, you know, 115 hours is a little bit more than a moment, but grand scheme of things, it's for me it's like a moment, you know, like it's a week of, I was doing 15 hours every day anyway. Like I'd been doing it before Edge of Faded came out, because I wanted to like push myself and see if I could do something that I thought would be challenging, and I was able to. But you know, it's like a moment in the span of, you know, months, right? You spend 1 week and you just go hard, and then past that point it's just tier 5s.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, they don't have that luxury, right? For you and I, you know, both share the luxury and the pleasure of being able to do this for a living.
Yep.
And most people don't have that. So I think like I'd probably just increase the drop rate, you know,
Yeah.
and at that 400 to 450, like, or make it linear. I think increasing drop rate will be better, because, you know, by the time Ash and Iron comes out, as long as you're playing the game kind of regularly, you'll be close to 450. And then what's going to happen is the 450 pinnacle cap, which spans from 400 to 450, is going to move to 550. So you're going to be back to that linear, like guaranteed power bonus every, or, you know, plus every time you run a Lost Sector or a Crucible game or a Fireteam op or a Pinnacle op. And it's going to make it so once you get past that 450 band into like dipping into like 451, 452, and, you know, going to 500, you're going to have access to tier 5 gear, I believe.
Yep.
With the ultimate difficulty. But like, you know, for me, like I said, it's something I did really quickly because I wanted it now. And I don't recommend that you actually go past 400. I recommend you get to 400 and then you play. And I have other thoughts about like things they can do to kind of make players feel like they aren't in such a drought, because I think like start in the early game, you pretty much don't want to keep anything. Like unless it's like tier 3, you don't want to keep it. And even tier 3s are like useless in my opinion in comparison to tier 4s and tier 5s. Like that's what you really want to keep.
Yep.
And like I think maybe having a very low percentage drop rate of basically, so like let's say you're starting out the game at 10 power. So that means your guaranteed drop for tier is going to be tier 1, and make it so, for example, you have like a 10% chance to get a tier 3 engram randomly from like killing an enemy, like as a random drop, you know. And then, you know, when you get to tier 3 guaranteed, you have or tier 2 rather, it would be like, you know, tier 4 randomly at like 5%, and then when you get to tier 3, it's like tier 5 randomly at like 1%. So when people are like doing these grinds to power level, because it is kind of a grind, it's pretty much around 100+ hours, they can like at least get like one morsel of a drop that gives them hope, instead of kind of just being in this drought. and I think that wouldn't hurt too much. Like, it wouldn't make it so it's really accessible, but it would give players a lot of hope to keep pushing on and keep grinding power. And I think just doing something as small as that would help immensely with how people feel about the power grind.
I think there's ways that they can do this too, because like I think you make an interesting point. I think there's a lot that they can do to make the grind like still exciting but more rewarding. So like one thing that comes to mind for me when I think about that they did really, really well with this expansion is I'm a huge raider, right? And so one of the things that I love is the new feat system, which allows you to permanently unlock higher tier gear within the raid with a chance of having random drops that are actually one tier higher. So it's a low percentage. So like, for example, if you do a 3 feet raid, you have the ability for potential tier 4 gear to drop. And for people who don't know what feats are, like at home, if you guys haven't raided yet, or maybe you've just done the base version of Desert Perpetual, basically these are layered on challenges that make the raid even more difficult. For example, they test your fire team more. So like, for example, you have like a token, like a res token limit. That's one we do frequently on stream. There's things like Banes and like other difficult enemies that you can add into the equation. So like, for example, in Hobgoblin, instead of just getting a Hydra, you get Wyverns that are now like chill Banes and they sprint at you and they try and slow you. And there's just like an extra layer of threat you don't normally get. And then there's something like there's the encounter challenges, which operate similarly to like raid challenges we've had in the past. And then there's like phase limits. So you have to 2-phase every boss, which honestly right now, if you guys are looking for the easiest way to unlock higher tier gear in the raid, the res token limit, I think it's like 3 reses, so it's not that bad, and that's per encounter. The Banes, obviously, which is probably the most difficult, and then I would say the phase limit, like you guys can go and use Outbreak and Supers and just 2-phase every boss like pretty easily, I think, for most teams. But the point being is that at the end of the raid, the thing that I love is that you can, from the final chest with spoils, purchase any piece of tier 4 loot or higher tier loot that's ever dropped from you. So say, for example, you've only done 2 feats. At the end of the raid, you would be able to go and purchase a tier 3. So you've done a 3 feat raid. I would be like these 3 feats here. I would be able to go and purchase a tier 4 from the final chest. And now once I've completed this challenge, I have tier 3s that will regularly drop from the raid. So on and so forth. I think it'd be really cool if they kind of incorporated that into like the general world tiers of Kepler. Like maybe there were feats you could complete, on the actual planet itself that unlocks more like regularly higher tier loot that drops more frequently or increases the rate of drops that you get or something. I feel like Kepler is something like, especially the mythic world tier, is something that's a bit of a missed opportunity, where outside of Caldera, like there's no real reason to go back to the mythic world tier and really like interact and engage with the end game a ton for leveling purposes. So I'd love to see that. And then for whatever reason, a lot of people at home will notice I'm only 256 power right now. So for those of you who don't know, I just had a newborn, so my time is more limited than it would normally be. I can't grind like crazy, but on top of that, I've been teaching people the new raid on stream. And one thing that really irks me is people can go and run a solo op in 3 to 4 minutes and repeatedly get powerful drops. However, if you run the raid, even with feats active, you get powerful drops for your first clear, and beyond that, they are on level and provide no power benefit to you at all, which to me is a big miss, especially for the most recent raid. But I'd also like to see this applied to legacy raids. If I'm spending 2 to 3 hours in an endgame activity, I should be rewarded with powerfuls every single time. And maybe the first clear of the week is like more beneficial. But the fact, like, I mean, if we're doing math here, Caldera takes you on average, Fizz, like 3, maybe 4 minutes to run, maybe less even sometimes, depending on the...
It's like 15 an hour, pretty much.
Yeah, so like, I don't think it's unreasonable that for every feat you have active, maybe you get an extra drop per encounter, and instead of them being +3s like they are in the solo ops, maybe they're +5s. Maybe Trials is a +5 or 7 once a week. Like, I don't know. Maybe the high feat raids are +10s the first time you do it each week, I don't think that's crazy unreasonable because it's multiple hours of time. I want to feel like I can go and do things elsewhere in the game and not feel like I'm like hamstringing myself by doing other things in the game. This is like a perfect reflection of it for people at home. I pretty much only do endgame raids with my community since this has come out. We've been working on the feats. This is where my power's at. I level kind of in my spare time, and this is what my power level is. So that's where a raider's, like a hardcore raider's power is at the moment, without like hyper fixating on the solo op playlist, which I think is unfortunate. So I'd love to see some improvements made there. But how about like the PvP side, Fizz? How is the trials loot slash, if there are issues with it, what's some feedback you would have on that front?
Well, trials the first week had a couple of issues, and it was like the ammo economy wasn't the way it should be, and I believe it's fine now. And there are a couple of things in terms of the way loot works right now, from my understanding, that are pretty funky. So like right now in trials, if you go on a 7-win streak, you are pretty much guaranteed 1 to 2 tiers higher than your guaranteed projected reward, which, like, let's say you are projected to get a tier 3 engram, right? And you go on a 7 streak. That means that you will either get a tier 4 and a tier 5. However, if you get anything less than a 7 streak, then sometimes it's 1 lower. So you'd be getting tier 2s or, a tier 3. I play PvP a lot, and I'm kind of like a hardcore. Maybe sometimes my takes might be elitist, in some way, shape, or form. But I think that that's like not good. I think that's really bad, and I think that it should be like you're guaranteed at least 1 tier higher. If you do under 7, and then if you do 7, then you're guaranteed 2 tiers higher. That's my opinion. Because right now trials feels very unrewarding for most players, because most players aren't at the 450 power band. They're not max power getting tier 5s constantly.
Right.
And I think getting a 7 streak is really hard for a lot of people, and even getting the lighthouse in general is difficult. And I think players should be rewarded for that more right now.
So it's a similar issue to Solstice, it sounds like, almost like, where if you're not super high power, you're not gonna get like a crazy tier of reward from doing the event, which I feel is also kind of problematic, since it's I think you said you can go flawless 1 time a week currently, is like a change in Edge of Fate. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Well, it's not a change in Edge of Fate. In the final shape, they made it so you can only, or maybe not in the final shape. At some point, they reworked, I can't remember exactly the timeline, but they reworked trials so you can only hit the chest once a week for loot. You can go back there, but you can't hit it several times. A lot of your loot will come from playing in the actual playlist on a full card.
Okay, I see.
So that's how that works, yes.
So, I mean, regardless of gear tier 2, do you know how those are dropping power wise? Like, so say you go to the lighthouse, are those pinnacle worthy drops as well, or would that not benefit you beyond 400 power?
I believe it is dropping a lot of pinnacles, and it's very good for that. I kind of am at it's kind of hard for me to tell because
your max power. Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the general consensus right here, and I think a lot of viewers at home would agree, is just like there needs to be more variance. And I guess I don't know. Would you say the solo ops should remain at +3, and then maybe like activities that take longer, like pinnacles? Would you be in favor of raising like how many levels those give you per engram, based on because a lot of these take so much more time? I guess it would just depend on what the activity is, but like a 7-win trials card, for example, I think once a week, if you can only get that chest once a week, those should be like +10 to 12s. If you can only do that a single time, I feel like you go out of your way multiple hours. To me, that seems reasonable. Same with the rating stuff, but I don't know how you see that.
For me, I think that they need to obviously have that system where I was talking about, where it's like 2 tier, you can get a engram drop that's 2 tiers higher than your projected reward, or like what you would typically get randomly at a very low percentage.
Mhm.
And then I think that they across the board need to increase pinnacle or like powerful drops that you get from Fireteam Ops, Pinnacle Ops, and Crucible. Like I think Crucible should be like 2 guaranteed per game, bare minimum, win or lose. Right now, there's like, you know, you kind of have to win to get a lot of rewards.
Mm.
And I don't think that it's bad that you have to win. I just think that it's bad that like you basically get nothing if you don't. And it kind of makes people play differently in a way that's like not very fun to play against because loot is on the line. And like I said, it's kind of cool that there is loot on the line, but I think for a lot of people that are losing in that scenario, it feels terrible.
Yeah.
So
It just seems like it's interesting because like I also play a bunch of other MMOs, and this is the most MMO I would say that Destiny has ever felt. Like we don't have the crafting. There's a reason to grind to higher tiers of loot. There's a reason to want to get to the pinnacle cap. There's like, you know, there's benefits for all of those things, and I think that's great. I just feel like the path to get there right now is like absurdly long and repetitive, and like I don't know. I feel like there's ways that they can improve that. And especially just like a departure from where we were just even a few months ago in the game. Like I would argue Destiny is the much more casualized version of a quote-unquote MMO, if you would even call Destiny an MMO at this point. I don't know, but this is the closest it's been to that, and I feel like for a lot of players it's probably a pretty stark contrast to what they're used to, and which is like, to your point, why people might be either getting overwhelmed or like annoyed that the power grind is so long. So like, to your point, like participation alone should always grant drops, and maybe like, yeah, sure, if you win maybe you get a bonus like third drop, but maybe every game drops plus like 2 powerfuls for everybody, or I don't know, something. But it just the drops feel very stingy across the board, so I would agree with that for sure.
outside of solo ops, I agree. I think solo ops is the only thing in the entire portal that like feels like it's adequately rewarding you for your time and effort,
Completely
and then
agree.
every other thing
Yeah.
else needs work. But otherwise, very good system, like very good foundation. I actually like the depth. I think that it just needs to be adjusted a little bit so that players aren't like discouraged by it and they're excited by it, you know. And right now, I don't think that that's the case for a lot of players. A lot of
Honest.
players, like, I feel like a lot of people that don't have that time, I feel resentment from them,
Yep.
you know, or they're bitter, and maybe not at me, but they're bitter about the system being that way because they want those things too, and they can't get them without sinking a time that they don't have
Yeah.
in the short term.
I mean, I totally get it. Like, honestly, with the Solstice event myself only being like 256 power, the loot's not going to be nearly as good, nor should it be. But I do feel like the curve to get there is like exponentially aggressive right now. And I'd also like to see them, like, I don't know, incentivize melee. You know how they have like the playlist activities where you go in and it just does like the auto picking and you just go through different solo ops? I'd like to make them, like, see them take advantage of that as well, and maybe incentivize like the randomness of activities, because I assume in future expansions they're going to go about adding new solo ops that are relevant to, like, you know, maybe the new expansion in Ash and Iron, or like, you know, Renegades or whatever. I'm sure they'll add to this, and there's always going to be that one mission that's the most optimal to run. So I wonder if like adding an extra drop into the quick play expert, where, like, you know, it's random, you can choose to get like 2 drops from that, or if you want to just go and do, you know, like the same mission over and over again and hyper optimize, you can, but maybe you're only getting 1 drop or something. Yeah, I feel like mitigating repetition of the same thing over and over and over again is probably good, which I think they did really well, honestly, in the Fireteam portal, of like, you get the bonus drop here, you get the bonus drop there, you go and you get like the triple drop in this on this mission. But I honestly feel like those shouldn't go away after you do them once. Like, they should continuously repeat to constantly like incentivize you to run different activities and make that choice. But I don't know, that maybe that's kind of niche feedback, but yeah. Any other feedback you have on, I guess, like the overall leveling system, anything moving forward with Destiny? Like, because I agree, I think the foundation is amazing, and we're seeing like the earliest entry to this from Bungie, and it has a lot of potential. Is there any like one thing you would want to see the most added that you haven't discussed yet, or like maybe just an additional thing you'd like to add on?
Leveling wise, not really. I mean, well, not anything that I haven't covered, but if I were to talk about something like a selfish thing that I want, is like an armor set passive that gives you airborne effectiveness. Like that's like the 2 set bonus is like 20 AE or something like that. I would really love that.
That'd be
That's like
cool.
kind of not relevant to what we're talking about, but I feel like everything else that I've covered, that I've said, pretty much encapsulates everything that I would like to see in the future or think would be good
Yeah.
from my perspective. But I think it's important as well to mention that like we don't know everything that's coming. Like we don't know everything that's going to be available. We only know what we know, and we're kind of speaking from that perspective, not from the perspective of someone that knows everything that's going to happen in the time frame of this expansion and the next one in terms of how leveling is going to work. So,
Yep, for sure. It's really interesting you say that. I think one wish that I would love to see that I think would expand build crafting even more would actually be letting weapons be a part of a bonus and being able to apply maybe exotics to armor bonuses as well as like an auto include, so that you could run more than just one like armor set if you wanted to. So like you could run a 4-set bonus and a 2-set bonus that are separate from each other, but it would require you to switch up your weapons and kind of incorporate weapons into your set build crafting as well. Even if it was only just one weapon that you could do it. For example, the raid, the raid perk, I think is really, really cool. So it increases the duration of Suspend, Unravel, Sever, Radiant Restoration. And being able to pair that with like a reduced splash damage set or like the Trials set, something like that, by having a weapon included on that. But you have to somehow incorporate one of those weapons into your build, I feel like would kind of diversify build crafting a bit more, where you could be a little bit more creative. So that's kind of like a long, like a definitely like a very wishful thinking thing that they could add. But I think for me, the number one in regards to leveling is definitely Pinnacle and Fireteam Ops need some love and they need variants. And to your point, I think they were definitely stretched thin resource wise to get such a huge overhaul to the game out, that hopefully like they're well aware that those things are missing and they kind of bring those things back to relevance by adding to the portal and maybe adding feats and things like that to past raids. I know that's super wishful thinking, but that would be really cool, to increase like the number of drops from there, or add set bonuses to the old armor in different raids and dungeons, things like that. Yeah. So, I think that's honestly that really good discussion, man. I appreciate you joining. Like I said, I think they cooked. I think you touched on it great. Like the foundation is there. They just need to make some tweaks, and I'm hopeful that interest in the game with Ash and Iron kind of gets rejuvenated, and with that they bring forward some really good changes that kind of help the frustration side of leveling be eased up a little bit. But Fizz, do you have any projects you're working on right now? Anything coming up on stream that people should know about?
Today I was working on a PvP build video for players that I would say are in the bracket of like average to below average, which is most players, to help you go 7-0 in trials. And basically it's just one part of the challenge with Destiny in particular is it isn't the most challenging mechanical game. Like, it's not Valorant or CSGO or something like that, or where it's very mechanically challenging. It's a lot of knowledge, and I'm just trying to help newer players, or maybe players that have never really been too deep into PvP, kind of give them a loadout that they can find success with and have fun with, because I think that's a lot. That's like half the battle, if not more. So that's something I'm working on that will be coming out tomorrow, actually, on the 7th.
Oh, right on, dude. I'll link that as well in the description. So if you guys you want to get some of that juicy tier 5 trials armor with a really good set bonus, there you go. Well, you guys definitely, and honestly, Fizz, I think you as a creator are so underrated in terms of your educational content. I wish you put more of it out, because you do a really good job conveying like the leveling guide. You've done a couple other PvP build videos in the past as well, like for current meta stuff. Dude, you're really honestly very talented at that stuff. So I love that you're doing more of that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Dude, thanks for joining. Let us know down in the comments what you guys think needs the most improvement, what you're enjoying about Edge of Fate and the portal and leveling system, the gear tiers, armor set bonuses, what you think might need some work, and kind of where you see the game moving in the future. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure you drop a thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.